right, what's up, Woodstock students? I'll tell you what, man, I am super excited about our message tonight from 1 Samuel chapters 5 and 6. So if you've got your Bibles, go ahead and find it. I'm going to be honest, this message is going to go a little deep. This might be one of the more important messages that we've covered here in the second semester of the school year. And so I hope that you guys are ready to focus and dive in, because I think God's got something to say to us through this message. So 1 Samuel chapter 5 and 6 tonight. So get ready. Growing up, I was all about professional sports. Major League Baseball, right? Believe it or not, I was all about the Atlanta Braves when I was a kid growing up. They were my team. And NFL, I was all about the Cleveland Browns. And NBA, I was all about a team called the Charlotte Hornets that didn't exist for a while, but now they do again, so it's kind of weird. But I was never into college sports. I just didn't care, wasn't interested, didn't know anything about it. But then when I went to Virginia Tech and got on that campus, I quickly realized that college sports were king. That's what it was all about. And at Virginia Tech, it was all about college football. Anybody else feeling that here tonight? Any college football fans? When I sat where you did, I would not have cared. But when I walked on that campus, all of a sudden, I became all about college football, because we had just been to the national championship game, and so everybody was into Virginia Tech football. And I caught the fever. I got all in on college football. I went to all the home games. I watched all the away games on TV, and I was passionate. And the biggest game of the year, my freshman year, was the game against the number one team in the country, the Miami Hurricanes, who were coming to our house to play in our stadium. And my dad, growing up, and at this time, my dad did professional television sports audio. He's the guy that does the sound for sports games. So when you watch a game on television, when you hear the hits of the linebackers, when you hear the commentators, when you hear the crowd scream, all of those sounds, that's what my dad did for a living. He provided all those sounds for television. And so he got me a job on the television crew with Fox Sports for the biggest game of the year, and I was going to be on the sidelines of that game pulling cables for the video guys. I was stoked. Biggest game of the year, and I've got a sideline pass. So I go down there on the sidelines, the game starts, and to be honest with y'all, it wasn't going so well for our team. Just to let you know how much we were riding the struggle bus that day, our quarterback completed more passes to the Hurricanes than he did to the Virginia Tech Hokies. Now, you don't have to know much about football to know that when your quarterback throws more passes to the other team than he does to your team, you're going to be in trouble. But thankfully, we had a great defense, a good running game, and we were still in this thing in the fourth quarter. The score was 24-16. We were down 8 points. And we got Miami deep in their own territory, pinned them deep, and they had to punt. And when they went back to punt, one of our guys ran in, blocks the punt, grabs the ball, runs into the end zone, and we score a touchdown, and everybody just goes nuts. Like, I'm on the sidelines losing it. We have just closed within 2 points to the number one team in the country, and time is winding down on the clock. And when it's late in the fourth, and you're down by 2, and you've just scored, what do you got to do? 2-point conversion, right? And so our team lines up, Hokies on one side, Hurricanes on the other. I'm standing right there by the end zone, as close to the end zone as I am to the front row in this room tonight. And I'm excited. I know that we're going to tie this game. It's going to be amazing. So the ball snapped. Our quarterback takes it. He drops back. He looks around, and he spots wide receiver Ernest Wilford. And Wilford is running to the outside corner right towards me. And our quarterback lofts a pass up in the air, and it sails, and it's like time slows down, like in the sports movie, you know what I mean? Like it goes into slow motion, it's like the soundtrack cuts in, it's like, dun, 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 and he gets his hands out there, and I'm just like, go, Ernest, Go, Ernest. Go to camp, Ernest. Catch that ball. And Ernest jumps up in the air. The ball goes into Ernest's hands. Ernest comes down with the ball. And 60,000 people just lose their minds, going crazy because we have just tied the #1 team in the country. But I could not join in the cheering. Because standing as close as I was to Ernest as I am to Graham right now, I saw something that no one else in the stadium except a few people saw. See, I saw the ball come down and go in to Ernest's hands and go through Ernest's hands and hit the field, and he fell on top of it, and we had, for all intents and purposes, just lost the game. And I realized that 60,000 people were screaming and cheering for absolutely nothing. One of the loudest sounds I've ever heard, felt it deep in my chest, for absolutely nothing. They were cheering our defeat. And I share that because I think that's a picture of the world that you and I live in. Because you and I go to school with, walk through the halls with, sit in class with, are in families with, share the aisles at Walmart with people who are living and dying and sacrificing for things that at the end of the day will mean absolutely nothing. Things that won't save. Things that won't give them what they hope they will get. They are giving their lives to these things. And tonight, many of us, if not most of us in this room, are doing the exact same thing. So here's my question for you tonight. This is what I want you to think about, the whole message. What are you living for? What are you giving your life to? What is ultimate? What drives you? What do you think about? What gets your best energy? What gets your most money? What are you passionate about? What are you living for? Let's tackle that question from 1 Samuel chapters 5 through 6. The first thing I want us to see tonight is that we need to bow to God. We need to bow to God. 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. I want to give you a little background before I read from the text tonight. Here's to set the stage for you. Israel, God's people, went to war against the Philistines and lost. And they're really demoralized. They're trying to figure out what went wrong. And then somebody has this idea. Hey guys, we lost, but you know what? Let's get the Ark of the Covenant of our God and let's take it into battle with us. They decided when we go to battle, we need a good luck charm. And they decided to use the Ark of the Covenant of God as a good luck charm. And if they took that into battle, then maybe they would win the fight. Now you might say, what is the Ark of the Covenant? Well, if you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, you have some idea. Indiana Jones, right? You have some idea of the Ark of the Covenant, but you may not know all the theological details. Here's what you need to know about the Ark. The Ark of the Covenant was a chest covered in gold with cherubim on top, carried by poles. In the chest were the 10 Commandments, the stone tablets that Moses had given to the Israelites, Aaron's rod that budded in the wilderness, a few other assorted things. But the main significance of the Ark of the Covenant was this. It was the focal point of the presence of God on earth. It resided inside the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle, the holiest place on earth. And it was where God would meet with his people. It was literally the throne of God on earth. Right? The Israelites didn't have an image of God that they worshiped or a statue. They had a throne where the priests would meet with God. That's what the Ark of the Covenant was. It was the presence of God on earth at this time. But they carry this thing in a battle, and they still lose. And the Philistines capture the ark and take it back to their territory. And they put it in the temple of Dagon, which is their god, because they believed that their god Dagon had vanquished the Israelite God. And so that's where we pick up the story in 1 Samuel chapter 5. And here's what we read. When the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. Now I want to pause right here and I want to camp out on this passage. The Philistines take the ark, the very presence of God, and they put it in a temple where it's surrounded by other gods, primarily the pagan god Dagon. And I want to stop right here because I think this is a picture of what happens in the heart of a believer. See, here's what I think. And here's what I guess I say I would know from the scriptures. All of us in here would say, we believe in God. I'm guessing. Now, there might be some of you here say, I'm not a Christian, I don't believe in God, I'm still trying to figure it out. But most of us in here, I'm guessing, would say, I believe in God, I follow Jesus, something like that. For those of us that say that, I'm afraid that what we tend to do is that we tend to take the very presence of God into this temple, right? Our body's a temple, 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Our body's a temple. We take the presence of God into our lives and we put it among all of our other idols. And we let it sit there as one idol, if you will, among many. And here's what I mean. You might say, well, Brian, I don't get what you're saying. I don't bow down and worship little golden statues. Okay? And I don't either. If you do that, we probably need to talk afterwards. That's a little weird. But most of us aren't sacrificing animals to pagan deities. We aren't bowing down and worshiping little golden, silver, or wooden statues. What do I mean? That we take the presence of God into our life and put it with all of our other idols that we have. See, idol, biblically speaking, an idol can be pretty much anything. I'll let Pastor Tim Keller describe for you what an idol can be. I think he says it best. He says this, what is an idol? It is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. Anything so central and essential to your life that should you lose it, your life would feel hardly worth living. An idol is whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I'll feel significant and secure. There are many ways to describe that kind of relationship to something, but perhaps the best one is worship. An idol is anything more important to you than God. Anything you look at to give you what only God can give. Anything you look at and say, I can't live without that. And so in a sense, the ancients were probably more honest about their idols than we are. You go back to the ancient people, the Canaanites and the Babylonians and all these people from the Bible who made these idols. What did they do? They took things like food and they deified it. They made it into a god and they called it Dagon. Dagon is the grain god. They made a statue and they worshipped it. They took things like sex and they deified it. They made it into a god and they called it Asherah and bowed down and worshipped it. They took things like civilization and culture and technology and they deified it and made it into a god and call it Eridu. And they would bow down and worship it. Is it we may not turn our gods into a statue, but we're just deceiving ourselves. We take things, even good things, and we make them God things. And they become idols. Let me give you some examples to think about. All right, we claim to worship God, but what you and I do is we take things and we deify them, we turn them into gods, and they become idols. One example would be people. Some of us take people and we turn their approval and their acceptance into an idol. We turn the approval of our parents, our teachers, our coaches, our friends into an idol, and we say, I have to have that. You want to know why some of you are so stressed out about school? Because you've turned the approval of your parents into an idol. And so you work so hard and you're so stressed out about succeeding because you want their approval. Or maybe it's the approval of your teachers. The reason that some of you are so afraid to go to your coach and ask for any time off any break whatsoever is because you desperately want the approval of your coach. The reason that some of you get together with friends and who you are changes. You become a different person. You act differently because you have made an idol out of the approval and acceptance of your friends. Your friends, your parents, your teachers are on the throne of your heart. They are your true God. Or let's take another one. Money and possessions. Right? We take money and we make it an ultimate thing. And so we can never have enough. You can't wait for Christmas to get all those presents. And then after Christmas, you spend all your time thinking about how am I going to spend the money I got from Christmas on more stuff. And you think, I can't wait for my birthday, or I can't wait till I save up to this thing. You're always looking for the next thing you're going to buy, and it's never enough. You get this video game, it's not enough. I need another video game. You get this piece of clothing, it's not enough. I need more clothes. I need more stuff. I need more money, more. And you're never satisfied because your God is never satisfied. Your God is money and possessions. A lot of you are planning, you're thinking about your life, and here's how you're planning your life. You're not saying, what does God want me to do? Who does God want me to be? You're saying, how can I plan my life so that I end up making enough money to have the stuff and to do the things that I want? So you're thinking about your career that way. You're thinking about where you go to school that way. You're thinking about how you plan your schedule, your academics, your extracurriculars, so that one day you can land with the money and possessions you want. It's called idolatry. Right? You're not asking what God wants. You're saying, what do I need to do to get the money and possessions I really want? Or sex and relationships. Hugely popular God in America right now. The reason you are so devastated when that person rejects you, that boy, that girl turns you down or breaks up with you, the reason you feel like you want to die inside is because you looked at that person and said, I need you to live. You put them on the throne of your life. They are your true God. And when they reject you, it destroys you. Destroys you. The reason some of you cannot stop looking at pornography on the internet is because you have a worship problem. Sexual pleasure occupies the role of God in your life. And the reason you can't stop is because sex is your master. And no one can serve two masters. That's the truth. So here's my point tonight. What idols have you set up around the presence of God in your life? What's ultimate in your life? Now, here's what ends up happening as this ark comes into the temple of Dagon. Verse 3. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. Now that would freak me out. You walk in, right, there's the ark, and there's Dagon bowing before the ark. That's cool. Then we read what happens next in verse 4. They put him back in his place, verse 4. But when they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. That's pretty awesome. Not only did God make Dagon bow down before the ark, but God, he went next level. He went varsity. He cut off Dagon's head and arms. So don't mess with God. He might cut your head off. Right? I mean, God shows that he is greater than Dagon. God shows the worship of false gods is foolish because false gods fail. They, like Dagon, cannot deliver on their promises. Dagon cannot protect his people. Dagon cannot deliver them the food that they desire. Only God can. All false idols fail and fall before the Almighty God. And here's the truth. Listen to me. This is important, student. Whatever you're giving your life to, whatever you've looked at and said, I have to have that, whatever you're living for, it will, if it is less than the God of the Bible, it will fail you. I've got a great quote from a man named David Foster Wallace. He's not a Christian, but he saw this truth. And he said this at a commencement address at Kenyon College in 2005. about worship and idols. He said, everybody worships. Everybody. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. Listen to this. This is amazing. He said this, if you worship money and things, if they are where you tap your real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age starts showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally grieve you. Worship power, and you will end up feeling weak and afraid. And you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is they're unconscious. They're default settings. That means that right now in this room, I think he's absolutely right. Now, unfortunately, David never found any hope. 3 years after this, he committed suicide. Because when you give your life to false gods, when you worship something less than the God of heaven and earth, it doesn't end well. But here's the thing, most of the time you don't know you're doing it. And I believe he's absolutely right. I think in this room tonight, many of us are giving our lives to our own personal Dagon, and we have no idea we're doing it. Hasn't crossed our mind. It's default for us. But we have to bow to God. He's greater. Only he will come through. But the second thing I want you to see here tonight is that we need to fear God. Take a look at the next part of the passage in verse 6. The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? They answered, let the ark of the God of Israel be brought around to Gath. So they brought the ark of the God of Israel there. But after they had brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic, and he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so the tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, they have brought around to us the ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people. They sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us or our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to the heavens. The hand of the Lord falls heavy on the Philistines, and God basically begins his victory tour. Now you remember, the Israelites could not defeat the Philistines. The armies of Israel lost twice to the Philistines. But God's like, that wasn't me, y'all. That was my people. They're being disobedient, so they lost. But I, God said, am still powerful. I'm still in charge, and I'm going to show you. First, he knocks down Dagon. Then he begins to afflict the city of Ashdod. People start getting tumors. People start dying. They freak out. They say, send it somewhere else. So they take it to Gath, one of the other cities of the Philistines. Same thing happens. People start panicking. Tumors are popping up. People are dying. They say, get it out of here. So they haul it off to Ekron. The people of Ekron see it coming. They're like, are you trying to kill us? This thing is coming in, and then people in Ekron start getting tumors. They start dying. The people that don't die got tumors popping out everywhere, and the cry goes up to heaven. It says everybody is panicking. A deadly panic is everywhere. The people are living in fear of God, and God is defeating the Philistines. The Philistines got 5 cities. God is on a victory tour. He's been to Ashdod. He's been to Gath. He's going to Ekron. He's coming to a city near you to blow some people up with some tumors and kill them, showing that he is the true and great God, in case the Philistines did not know it. And they're terrified, and they panic, because their gods that they trusted in, their false gods, could not stop the true God. So they're panicking. Our false gods are failing everywhere, and the true God is showing himself victorious, and they are afraid because they are seeing the true God for the first time in their lives, and they fear him. Growing up in Virginia, I grew up in the mountains. And the nice thing about growing up in the mountains is you really don't get that bad of weather because the mountains tend to break it all up. So for the first 22 years of my life, I never had to worry about tornadoes. I thought tornadoes were cool, right? Movie Twister, I'm like, man, tornadoes are pretty awesome. It would be cool to see a tornado. What an awesome display of the power of nature. I thought they were cool, but I never had to ever go hide in a basement for a tornado warning or anything like that. We just didn't really have them in the mountains of Virginia. But then in 2010, I moved out to West Kentucky, bordering the states of Missouri and Illinois. And it was flat. I mean, not completely flat, but pretty flat. And that spring, the first spring that I lived there of 2011, was one of the years of one of the worst tornado outbreaks across the country. And I remember one day as I'm sitting there in my living room, the rain is coming down outside, there's a little bit of thunder in the distance. Somebody texts me. I'm sitting there, I'm reading a book, watching television, TV's on, just chilling out. And somebody texts me. And they say, Brian, or me and my wife, and they tell us that a tornado has touched down about 10 miles away from where we are. And I go, oh, that's cool. And I go back to reading my book and kind of half watching TV. Right? Because 28 years of my life, I never worry about tornadoes. It's not a big deal. If it comes, maybe we'll go out, take a picture, put it on Instagram. It'll be cool, right? And so I'm sitting there, about probably 15, 20 minutes passes, when all of a sudden I hear this sound. And I've never heard a sound like this before. I'm like, I've been through a lot of storms. That is a new one. It sounds like the wind just turned into a transformer and is coming to kill me. I don't know what just this loud whine that got louder and louder. And I'm like, I kind of stood up and I was like, my wife, do you hear that? Is a dishwasher messing up? What in the world is that sound? And it gets louder and louder. And then I look out my window and I see the tree in the front of our yard all of a sudden get ripped right off of its trunk. Like I had seen trees get knocked over, just going, that wasn't what this one did. It got ripped off, leaving a stump, it was a pointy stump out of the ground. And then the wind hurled it right at the window in the living room, just smack right up there, tree everywhere. And I go, ah! Like tornado is coming down. So I'm getting like flashbacks to Twister movie with Bill Paxton. I'm like freaking out in my mind. I'm like, what do I do? Hey, I've never done it. Basement. We have a basement. So I thought, let's run to the basement. So I grab all my most valuable possessions, right? Laptop, bag of Doritos. I'm heading down. Did not bring the Bible, right? I can buy a new one. No, I'm just not the best Christian in that moment, right? And I run down to the basement, and basically what ends up happening is this EF2 tornado dropped down in a town about 10 miles from us and just tore up some buildings, knocked some stuff over, and then came across right to our neighbor, what was left of the tornado, came across to our neighborhood, came right across our house, tore up, I think, about 4 or 5 trees in our yard, pulled some pieces off the house, messed up my neighbor's house, then went back across the field over a lake, and witnesses say it started sucking up water into a funnel, which would have been sweet to see, except I was downstairs in the basement, curled up in the fetal position, sucking my thumb, okay? See, the truth is, the next time we had a tornado warning, which we had a whole bunch that week because it was like day of devastation. It was like that terrible week in 2011 where there was a bunch of tornadoes. The next time we had a tornado warning, guess what? I wasn't chilling out on my couch. Nope, where we were in tornado watch, I'm like watching the news every 5 seconds. I'm like, okay, got my helmet on, got mattress. I'm like stocking up the basement with supplies. When the tornado warning finally comes on, I'm like glued to the television, like tracking it with the meteorologist. Everything has changed. Why? Because I had heard about tornadoes. I had seen them on TV, but I hadn't experienced them. I didn't know how terrible they could be. And of course, my experience was very small compared to what some people have gone through, but it was enough to show me the power that was there and to put some fear in me. That's exactly what the Philistines are experiencing. They'd heard of the God of Israel. We're going to read that they'd even heard what he did in the Exodus to Egypt, but they hadn't experienced it until now. And a great panic went up in the city when they saw his power and they knew what they were dealing with. Here's my question to you. Do you know this God? Do you know this God? Do you know his power? Do you fear him? Or do you just have a knowledge of him? Like you come here, you sing about it, you've seen it, but you have not experienced, you don't know personally the power and awesomeness of this living God. And until you do, idols will always rule your life. You need to understand who it is you're worshiping, who it is you're serving. And I can see it with some of y'all. You know, when we have times of worship, when we dive into his word, you're just not that interested because you don't know him. You've not experienced his power. You don't live in fear of him, in a reverence and worship. Some of you do. But until you do, idols will rule your life. Money, approval, fame, sex, power are meaningless before this God, as meaningless as Dagon was. Do you know him? We've got to fear God before we can bow to God. But then here's the question. Once we've seen his power, once we know who he is, once we've seen what our false idols are, here's the question. How will we respond to him? Take a look. This is the last thing here tonight, and then we're going to wrap it up. How will we respond to this God? We see two responses. First of all, there's the response of the Philistines. I'm going to just kind of summarize it here. Chapter 6, verse 1. The ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, what shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us with what we shall send it to its place. And they basically say, here's the deal, guys. You got to send the ark back. You got to send it with a guilt offering so that God will forgive the fact that you took his ark away. And then maybe he's going to heal you. They also say, make sure you do this test to see if it truly is God that is afflicting you. I'll give you the short version. Yes, God passed the test. It was God who was afflicting them. And they say, we have got to get this ark out of here. And that's what they end up doing. We read this in verse 7. Now then, take and prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows on which there has never come a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. And take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart and put in a box at its side the figurines of gold which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go its way and watch. If it goes up on the way to its own land, to Beth-Shemesh, then it is he who has done this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by coincidence. So they send the ark back with a test and with guilt offering. And so what's interesting is that rather than turn and worship the great God that they've experienced, they decide we got to get him out of here. Right? Rather than worship him, we got to get rid of him. That's like you go to the doctor's like, dude, your heart is struggling. Your arteries are clogged, your cholesterol is high, your blood pressure is high. You're going to die if you don't change the way you're eating. And so you go back to the doctor and he says again, you've got to change the way you're eating. You go back to the doctor again, he says, you got to change the way you're eating. And you decide, instead of changing the way you're eating, to stop going to the doctor. Right? I don't want to hear that again. I'm just going to stay home. Pass me another cheeseburger, right? I mean, that's essentially what they do. Rather than fall down on their faces and worship the true and living God, they say, just get him out of here. Send his presence away. That's one response when you come face to face with the true God, is to say, get away from me. I'm fine on my own. I'm happy with Dagon. I'm happy with my money. I'm happy with my sex. I'm happy with my boyfriend or my girlfriend. I'm happy with my possessions and my iPhone and my wardrobe. I'm happy with the way I look. I'm happy living for the things I'm living for. God, you can get away. And here's the deal, guys. I think for a good chunk of you, and this is just from experience, I hope it's not true, but I've been doing this long enough to think that it might be. I fear for a good chunk of you, this is the response you'll ultimately take. I've said this to so many teenagers over the years, and then I watch, and then they say, oh, it's not going to be me, and then I watch it happen. So I'm going to say it to you, and I'm going to pray that for most of you this won't be the case, but I know for a lot of you it will. Here's what you will do. You will decide at some point, it may be in 9th grade, it may be in 11th grade, it may be when you go to college, it may be a couple years into college, you will decide at some point that you love your false idols more than you love the true and living God. And you will send his presence away rather than get away from your idols. I mean, you'll start, here's what will happen, 11th grade maybe. You'll start dating somebody who doesn't love Jesus, and you will say, this relationship means more to me than Jesus, and you'll walk away. For some of you, it'll be you'll get busy. Sports, academics, a job, you'll start making some money, and all of a sudden, you know what? I've got other things to do. Listen, I don't think for most of you it's going to be that some science professor is going to give you some kind of information. You're going to be like, oh, I guess there's no God. I'll just walk away. I think for most of us that decide to turn away, it'll be because we ultimately decided we wanted our idol more than we wanted Jesus. I watched it happen. I just watched it happen last year to a girl who was in my ministry for years, who loved Jesus, who was serving Jesus, who went on mission with Jesus, met a guy, got in a relationship, wasn't even a good relationship, but it was enough, and she started fading away bit by bit until we stopped seeing her in church anymore. Why? Because she said, I'm turning to him for all the acceptance and approval that I should be getting from God. And my question for you is, what are you living for? What are you going to send the presence of God away for? There's one other response that I want to close with tonight, and that's the response of the Israelites. Here we are in verse 10. The men did so and took 2 milk cows and yoked them up to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on a cart with the box and the golden mice and the images of the tubers. And the cows went straight in the direction of Beth-Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth-Shemesh. Now the people of Beth-Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and when they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark, they rejoiced to see it. The cart came into the field of Joshua Beth-Shemesh and stopped there. A great stone was there, and they split up the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which were the golden figures, and set them upon the great stone. And the men of Beth-Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrificed sacrifices on that day to the Lord. The men of Beth-Shemesh, the Israelites, see the ark of the Lord coming, see the presence of God coming back, and they shout for joy. They rejoice. And they make sacrifices. They welcome the presence of God in. And they welcome him back, even though this is a God they can't control, even though this is a God they can't contain, even though this is a God who requires sacrifices. And as you read further on, even though this is a God who's going to kill some of them for idolatry. This is a God who's going to mess up a lot of what they've got going on, but they realize that he's the true God, and so he's worth it. They rejoice and they sacrifice when he comes back. Will you welcome the presence of God? Will you rejoice and worship and make sacrifice to him instead of to your false gods? When you do, you know what? He is going to mess up your life. This God is going to mess up your life. You can't contain him. You can't control him. He hates your idols. He's going to tear down those idols. He's going to rip them out from your hands, but he's worth it. When my wife and I got pregnant the last time, and by that I mean mainly my wife, not me, we went in and got our very first ultrasound. And the doctor said, man, everything looks great. You know, you've got one child in there. They're healthy. You know, come back in a couple months and we'll do the gender ultrasound where you find out if you're having a boy or a girl. And so we had some health insurance mix-ups going on. And so we came back a little bit late. It was about 4 months before my wife was supposed to give birth that we finally made it back for another ultrasound. And I remember going into the room and sitting there in the chair. They kind of get the ultrasound where they find the babies. And as they're trying to get a good picture, I'm looking at the screen. Now, I've been through this a couple times. I've seen a lot of ultrasounds, but I've never seen an ultrasound like this. As I looked at the screen was full of a bunch of arms and legs, and I thought, what do we have, an octopus? Like some kind of Guardians of the Galaxy baby? I don't know what's going on here, you know? And so I'm watching the screen, and then the nurse goes, oh, there's 2 in there. And my reaction in that moment, I'll never forget, was, oh, isn't that nice? I always wanted 3 kids. This is more efficient this way. Of course, you know, here's the thing. It was 4 months before she was supposed to give birth. We'd already bought a car in anticipation of 2 kids. We needed to go buy another car in anticipation of 3 kids. We had to totally rethink the way we were going to do the nursery. We had to buy more stuff. We had to get it totally messed up our plans now that we're having 2. And then once they finally got into the world, my blessed twins, they really messed up my life. Let me tell you, I don't have a social life anymore. I go home, I chase kids around all the time, right? My wife and I collapse on the couch at 9:30 and we fall asleep. Like, we don't need, like, TV? Yeah, for a little bit, then we're asleep. And we're just exhausted all the time. And listen. Oh, there they are. They made it up. They're a little stretched. There we go. This is an older picture of them, but I'm glad that we got it up there. Listen, they wear us out. Like before, when we had 1 kid, we had all kinds of free babysitting. Ain't no free babysitting anymore. Nobody wants to watch 3 kids for free, okay? I mean, We don't get out much. When we want to go somewhere, it takes like an hour to get ready. And once we finally get there, we just spend the whole time trying to prevent our kids from destroying wherever we are. I mean, it is crazy. I mean, just the other day, I'm sitting there feeding the twins, right? So I'm just 1, 2. This is how you feed them, right? Okay, one and then the next one. I'm feeding Gideon, and Gideon's decided that it's fun to scream, like just for fun. He's like, ah! He just screams at the top of his lungs, and he goes, like, I just deafened you. And he's screaming at the top of his lungs. My 3-year-old is climbing up on top of my head like, I'm climbing on Daddy. And I'm like, come on, eat your food. I've got, and then Ben is over there and he's like, I love food, at 2, and sneezes all of the corn and carrot mush all over my clothes. And I'm like, oh, jeez. Listen, my twins have wrecked my life. But here, let me tell you something. My wife and I sometimes joke around and we're like, you know what? We're like, which twin would you give up, right? They're not out there anymore. And here's what we always say. I can't imagine life without either one. I wouldn't trade Benjamin. I wouldn't trade Gideon for the world. They have wrecked my life, but it is a beautiful, glorious mess. And here's what I want you students to get here tonight. God, when you welcome into your life, will wreck it. He will tear down your idols. He will rearrange your priorities. He will mess up the stuff that you got going down. But it will be a beautiful, glorious wrecking. And you will look at it and you would say, I would not have it any other way. This is what it means to live. Here's the deal. You get to choose who's going to wreck your life. Because that other thing you're living for is going to wreck it too. That relationship, that money, that sport, right? Those friends, they're going to wreck it too. Or you're going to wreck it chasing it. And that will not be a beautiful, glorious mess. So my challenge is tonight, who you want to wreck your life? The God of the universe who loves you? Or some false God that's going to fail you? Now, we're not going to have an Ark of the Covenant come rolling up our driveway, pulled by 2 cows. That's not going to happen. Here's what we do have. Listen up. This is where we end, right here, students. We do have a Savior named Jesus, who, like the Ark of God, went into captivity, died on the cross, and like the Ark of God, came back through his resurrection so that we could welcome him. Let me ask you, will you? Is he your God? Is he what you're living for tonight? Or is it something else? Is it Jesus who died for you? Or is it something else? Let's bow our heads, close our eyes, and go to the Lord in a word of prayer. What are you living for? What are you passionate about? What fills your heart? What, if you lost it today, would you be devastated? What would devastate you? Where does your money go? Where does your time go? What do you think about the most? What do you talk about the most? This thing might be your idol. Might be the very idol that you have set up in your life, and you've got the presence of God in there, but it's all about that thing. Tonight, here's my challenge to you. Are you willing to trade it? Are you willing to welcome Jesus in and say, Jesus, you be my God. You died for me. You rose again. You love me. You be my God tonight. Help me to set aside this idol. It might be a good thing. It might be a great thing. But it doesn't deserve to be a God thing in your life. Maybe you're here tonight and you would say, you know what, Brian? The truth is I've never welcomed the presence of God into my life through Jesus Christ. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a believer tonight. He can't be my God because I've never received him. If that's you tonight, you say, Brian, tonight, you know what? I've never received this Jesus as my God. I've been chasing after other gods, and I would like to receive him as Lord and Savior for what he did for me. For the first time tonight, would you just slip up your hand? See, I want to make Jesus my God tonight. The presence of God isn't in my life at all right now. For everybody else tonight, what is more important to you than God? What are you giving your life to? And tonight, are you willing to lay it down and take the first step in saying, I'm done living for this. I'm living for Jesus. Come make a mess of my life, Jesus, because I'm tired of this thing making a mess of it. and I want to give you my everything. Father, I pray that tonight you would help each of us to look into our own hearts and figure out what we're living for that's not you. We may have the presence of God in our life, but we've set up other idols around it. And tonight, God, I pray those idols would fall. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.